In public session. The purpose of this morning's engagement is to meet with the new Garda Commissioner, Mr Drew Harris, to discuss matters relating to An Garda Síochána and the future direction of the service. He is joined by Deputy Commissioner John Toomey, who is welcome back again, and Chief Administrative Officer Joseph Nugent, also very welcome. Seated behind them are Mr Andrew McLinden, Director of Communications, and Ms Marie Broderick, Superintendent, the Office of the Commissioner. We are also joined in the public gallery by Mr Liam Geraghty of the Garda Press and Public Relations. I want to say, Mr Harris, you are very welcome here before the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice and Equality, and I'll begin by congratulating you on your recent appointment. I shall shortly invite you to make your opening statement, but before doing so, I have to make the normal privilege reminder. And if I could, just before we get down to business, once again, please ensure that your phones are in switch-off mode. They do interfere with the recording equipment. So I draw the attention of our witnesses to the situation in relation to privilege. Please note that you are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary privilege, the parliamentary practice, I should say, to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name, or in such a way as to make him or it identifiable. And members of the committee should be aware that under the salient rulings of the Chair, members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official by name in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I would now like to invite Mr Harris to make his opening statement.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to meet with you today. And can I just say right from the outset how much I look forward to working with the committee in a spirit of accountability, openness and transparency, and all in a way which will improve the policing service that we provide to society. I've submitted written comments, and I wanted then just to enlarge on those somewhat. One of the themes I'd like to pick up then is in terms of just how policing now is changing. This has been identified in the Commission on the Future Policing in Ireland. Policing is moving more towards dealing with harm and vulnerability, and the Commission on the Future in Policing sets out that very clearly and is a recognised phenomenon right across Europe. So the Commission has set out what the next steps are for us as an organisation, and it will be a roadmap for us over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of the service that we'll provide, policing service that we will provide. But within that, we need to have an understanding of the demands placed upon us, how those demands might change over the next 3 to 5 years, and therefore how we will deploy our resources and what our resources will look like in terms of the people that we employ and the skills that they have to deliver the policing service. These are big management problems. Many police services across Europe are wrestling with these. But two particular strengths that we have, and that I think I should highlight in terms of how policing is changing, is one, that we still retain a very strong link with local communities, and that's been very evident to me, and we'll wish to retain and strengthen that going forward. Also, as I've visited stations and offices throughout the country, I've met with very high quality people, and it's clear from our own cultural audit that they too are absolutely committed to providing an excellent policing service to the people of Ireland, and they are determined to do so. So I've arrived at a time of backdrop of both the future of policing in Ireland Commission reporting of our own modernisation and renewal programme, our own cultural audit as well, but also then, only 2 weeks ago now, the report from the Charlton Tribunal and the recommendations that that makes. And the first 3 documents, the Commission, our own modernisation renewal programme and the cultural audit, they do set out what has to be done and a roadmap as to how that should be taken on. But I think in particular the Charlton Tribunal report, I've read it, and I particularly read the last few pages, which I feel are almost written directly towards me, and they are a clarion call for action. And we will take action. We'll take action in terms of reforming the policing service that is provided, and bringing and reassuring the people of Ireland that we are here to protect them. We are here to do their very best for them as public servants, and we're absolutely determined to do that. I'm also fortunate, I think, compared to any of my contemporaries, that I've arrived also at a time of investment. There's very considerable investment in An Garda Síochána. We're an organisation which is growing, almost unique, I think, amongst law enforcement agencies. But there's a responsibility on me and the rest of the organisation to use these resources efficiently and effectively, but in such a way also that promotes confidence in the policing service that we provide and in An Garda Síochána. And that's important in terms of the behaviours that we exhibit both inside and outside of the organisation. And at every opportunity then, I emphasise the importance of the Code of Ethics. It's a living document. It's there to guide us on the behaviours that internally that we expect, but more importantly that the public expect of us, and that we must live and demonstrate to them every single day. For my part, I'm motivated by public service. Policing is my public service. I applied, and now I was appointed, and I'm here to serve, and I'm here to serve and lead An Garda Síochána in the next stage of its development, but all with a view to making sure that we are doing our very best to protect the people of Ireland, and particularly the vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Harris. I now open it up to members, and I have 3 indications already: Deputy Colm Brophy, Deputy Jim O'Callaghan, Deputy Donegal Leary. Deputy Colm Brophy.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. First of all, obviously, Commissioner, just to congratulate you on your appointment, to say we look forward, and I look forward as a committee member, to engaging with you and your colleagues over the coming months. And hopefully years, maybe. But the couple of key questions, I suppose, the first thing that I really want to go into is the recent, obviously, report which we had into the future of policing. Do you believe that there should be a complete and full implementation of the report from your management team? Is there any aspects, particularly of the report, which you, having looked at as a management team, that you would see that you might have a slightly different approach or a different approach? Or do you believe that the actual, I think you referred to it as a roadmap, effectively, should be implemented in full?
Well, if I can say, the Commission on the Future of Policing is a very valuable document. And when I say set aside a roadmap, we are accepting all of the recommendations that are within it. We've been asked to report on those recommendations, but there are some recommendations that perhaps we would seek some modification in terms of our view going forward. And if I pick one, there's a concentration on district policing, and we would wish to have a focus. The district policing provides the local community-focused service to the public, but within a divisional structure. And so the divisional structure, which should be a division, should be self-sufficient for the majority of what it has to do. Obviously, at times, the whole service may have to come in behind a district to assist it in big public events or a series of criminal outrages, for instance. But by and large, a division should be self-sufficient and should have sufficient resources that the divisional commander, the chief superintendent, does have sufficient to provide a locally tailored service to the public, and that will be based on the district model, but the division should be autonomous in terms of the provision of the local policing service, and should have HR and financial support, but all then within a corporate framework. So if I set the corporate framework for how we go about our business, it'll then be for the divisional commanders, the chief superintendents, and their staff then to deliver on the local service and the local characteristics that people will require.
Okay. In relation, is there any other area that you would have that type of, let's say, nuanced or variation on, compared as a difference compared to interpretation compared to their report?
Well, we've picked out small, I would say, nuances only, and so things that they have suggested, and if I pick some of them out there in respect of training, well, we're already well developed in terms of our own learning and development strategy. So rather than setting all that work to one side, we would seek some sort of modification, because a lot of what has been said in the Inspectorate's report into future policing in Ireland, also then our own modernisation renewal programme and the cultural audit, has set us on a course already, and by and large we're all facing in the one direction. This Commission has made a lot of that public, but also then brought it all together, and so in effect we don't want to lose some of the work that we've already started and are well underway. So they are just in effect nuances on some of the recommendations, a limited amount of them.
Okay. Can I move on to one other aspect, the community policing aspect?
Yes.
And obviously within their roadmap and their report, it's a very, very strong emphasis on community policing.
Yes.
I'd be interested in some concrete examples from yourself. My personal experience of this is that community policing delivered by An Garda Síochána works very, very well occasionally. And it works very, very well because somebody comes in, they're enthusiastic, they're on the ground, they're working with the community, but it's never envisaged as a career, or it's never envisaged as a long-term posting. They move on, they get promotion. Yes. It's the type of job that the young man or woman out of Templemore does and then moves on, and therefore it stop-starts. There's an immediate gap takes place, they move on, the post isn't filled or the post gets diverted. Under the proposal that's there, the whole force re-emphasises and refocuses to community policing.
Yes.
How do you more concretely envisage that you would be changing structures to deliver that as distinct from the way in which most communities would feel it works at the moment?
Undoubtedly community policing will be the ethos of the organisation. But also then, as you have said yourself, structurally we have to deliver on this as well. Now, the particular characteristic of the service we have to deliver is that we've both, urban areas where there's deprivation, high crime, and the problems attendant with that, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, mental health issues, all of which require a multi-agency response. Community policing there should play its part, and in effect the officers who engage in that, the members who engage in that, become specialists and should be regarded as specialists, because they need to have skills in order to work with other agencies, know what other agencies might do, but also then problem-solving skills then with the community as well. So it's just not a thing that you do for a period of time to build up that specialism, but also it does depend upon relationships as well. The rural area, the rural area is somewhat different, just because I think that there'll be a more hybrid model. So officers out in rural areas will not only just have that problem-solving community responsibility, they'll also have a response capability as well. And there will be, and we're still working this through, but I would envisage dedicated community policing teams built up against actually the need that we would see in terms of critical areas where those interventions can make a real impact. So, and it's clear to see that you can see that in urban areas and as I've said, areas of deprivation, where there's a high demand for our services, but a high demand for other services. And indeed, the Commission of Policing takes that on further in terms of widening the definition of policing and widening who all may be engaging in policing. And a lot of that is around making sure that the state's energies are focused on the right place at the right time and towards the right people. There are areas and individuals of high demand, and collectively we need to work together to see how best we can address that to improve the quality of their lives, but also the quality of the lives of the people who live around them. And community policing is a big piece of that.
I've one final, Chair, if you'll indulge me, just one final linking really to that. In the former police service which you served in,
yes,
there was a very extensive programme actually of closing of police stations.
Yes.
Obviously there's a very contentious issue within the closing or potentially reopening of Garda stations. In the context of refocusing on community, in the context both in the urban and the rural, and in the context of delivering the type of service you were talking about there, what is your view on the need for additional Garda stations, the locations, whether or not we need to radically increase the number of Garda stations, or can we deliver that type of community-involved policing you were talking about there with the Garda station profile we have at the moment?
I haven't come to a final conclusion on that. Certainly, I don't feel any particular pressure to close stations. I feel the stations that I should retain and examine then actually what's going on and what's happening in terms of the demand they're meeting, but also then the reassurance they're providing. People do take comfort from having a Garda station in their location. There's no doubt about that. But what I have to look towards is where are the new demands and where are the issues that the intervention of Gardaí will make a difference. So the issue also then comes down to resourcing and how best then that we use our resources. And my very early comments about the demand that we are dealing with and how that demand is changing and how best then we're placed to meet that demand. Not necessarily that the building or opening and reopening stations is the way to go forward. We want to be sure that our service is responsive and people feel it's approachable and it's providing a local service. Undoubtedly that is true. At the same time, stations are an expensive, they are expensive and draw a lot on the public purse. So I couldn't make any promises here today that there will be wholesale reopening of stations. It will be against need and the actual demand that is filling, as opposed to just making a promise that we will reopen stations.
Just thank you for your answer, and also, by the way, I meant to say, just to acknowledge your remarks about that investment, that there is investment going in,
yes,
which is very welcome to hear you say that. Particularly in the IT area, we've heard so much over so many years here. I hope you will utilise that investment in IT to deliver some of the solutions we need.
Well, if I may make further remarks, there are other ways of delivering a local policing service, and so there's our social media presence, but also in Store Street, I saw the mobile police station, which is used there and which is very well received. So there are alternative things other than bricks and mortar. Bricks and mortar are only bricks and mortar, but obviously the community get a reassurance from there, because actually in effect where we have a station, they see Garda patrols coming backwards and forwards in the field, there's visibility, and I can look to my last service, and a lot of the closures were driven by the economy, the economics of keeping police stations open. I don't feel that same pressure on me at this moment in time, because we are at a time of investment, but I'd want to think about the divisional structure, and some of that community policing structure before it came to conclusions about the reopening of stations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Brophy. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone, for coming in particular you, Commissioner. It's your first time here, so thank you for coming, and I wish you all the best in the job. I think you've been Commissioner now for 2 months or so. What's your assessment of the force?
Well, as I've said it already, there's a couple of very healthy things to point to. One is actually the people we have within the organisation. The cultural audit flagged up how committed they are to public service, and also then the local confidence that there is in people having their local guard. So that's important, and there's probably less confidence in the senior management, and that's for myself and the rest of the senior leadership team to work upon in improving the leadership of the organisation. The second piece is we do have those strong community contacts, but beyond that, then the process of, in fact, digitisation and the digital investment that is required. There's a lot of time and effort is spent on dealing with paper, excuse me, and also then when I talk about demand, it's very difficult in a paper-based system to understand entirely what your demand is. We don't have the statistics to understand how much time we're spending on particular types of calls. We are moving towards a computer-aided dispatch, which will give us far more information about what we're spending our time in terms of patrol on, our patrol time, but also the responses, the incidents that we're responding to, and how long we're spending on incidents. So there's a lot more information, I think, that I require, and digitisation is a way through that. Beyond that, then, there's also the training and development of our staff, and there's a lot of systems coming online that requires training, but also then we want to increase the focus on the human rights aspect of policing, and also then on the code of ethics and how central that is. Now, the code of ethics is everyone is undergoing code of ethics training. That'll be completed by the end of the year, and that's been a big commitment by the organisation to deliver that. So, if I say that, the people are good and the public support is good. The systems, some of the systems are old and antiquated, but there is a programme to bring those up to speed. A paper-based system in an organisation of our size and the amount of demand we're dealing with is just not sufficient in the 21st century. So that's why I say the concentration has to be upon. And also then, I would say some of our stations that I've visited, they are not of the standard I would expect it. That some are a bit tired and run down. Indeed, some of them are pretty crowded, and we've had to go outside of our core premises and extend out into other buildings. But I know these issues are attended to and get attention all of the time. But I think for my part, I also want to bring a degree of corporate governance and corporate discipline, if I use that expression, to what we're doing, so that we're working within a corporate framework, but providing then local autonomy and autonomy then for operational commanders to deliver.
Okay, like in comparison to the PSNI where you worked before, are there any weaknesses that stand out to you in Garda Síochána that when you came as Commissioner you thought, God, we did it much better in the PSNI?
Well, everything that I've seen here is of an organisation seeking and wanting to move on. I think the investment in IT happened in PS9 maybe 15 years ago.
Okay.
So that's a big difference. And then other things which are now being lifted, such as risk management, for instance, that was in place maybe 10 years. So, but I recognise entirely the journey that the organisation's on. I recognise entirely the place it's at the moment, but also the investment that is being made and the desire of people to move forward.
Okay. Do you think it's a disciplined force in Garda Síochána?
I think that it's a disciplined force, but it's not helped by its discipline procedures, if I put it like that. I think that we perhaps need to sort of break the link with a discipline code, and this has been set out very clearly both in the Commission's report, but also the Charlton Tribunal, that are, and going right back actually to the Morris Tribunal, that our discipline procedures aren't fit for purpose, and I would agree with that. I think we need to think far more of an organisation instead of discipline, where we are intervening around poor performance. We're intervening appropriately in terms of either support, supervision, extra training, but actually a management intervention as opposed to discipline intervention. But in cases of misconduct, serious misconduct, where your trust in an individual is entirely broken, that then they have no place in the organisation.
The Commission on the Future of Policing recommended doing away with the policing authority and transferring its functions elsewhere. That's obviously not a matter for you, it's a matter for the Oireachtas to determine. But what's your assessment of the policing authority from your engagement with it? And do you think it's a body that's worth preserving?
Well, for me, the policing authority is an organisation which where it's very public accountability, and accountability in modern policing is essential in terms of, well, it keeps us sharp, but also then it promotes confidence, public confidence in the organisation as well. So it fulfils an essential role, and it fills an important role. And I know that I appeared in public in front of them 4 or 5 weeks ago, and there was a 3-hour grilling, and certainly it sharpened me up, and there again on Thursday as well. And that's a good thing. That's what it's supposed to do in holding me to account around the performance and my senior staff in respect of that. I think the Commission has considered this and has made its recommendation. And then it's for government then to consider that. And I don't really want to get drawn into that debate.
That's a fair response.
But I would say that no matter what happens in the future, the policing authority remains the body which constantly is engaging with us and holding us account. And so I have to take that relationship very seriously, and I will throughout the rest of its tenure, for how long that might be. And indeed, they could well be there for a long part of my tenure. So I have to treat them very seriously, and I've assured them of that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you when you referred to the last chapter or so of Mr Justice Charlton's report, which set out obligations of members of An Garda Síochána. I think it is very useful. One of the most important obligations, he says, is to be visible. And you mentioned that in your statement as well. Like, what can you do to increase Garda visibility? And to what extent are you aware of how many members of the force are out amongst the general public any day of the week?
Well, the workforce modernisation that we're undergoing, the workforce change in terms of employing Garda staff, is the main vehicle, plus then the increase in Garda members and officers are the vehicle by which we will increase visibility. And so we are in the fortunate position where we are able genuinely to say we will have more visible guards on patrol right across the country, and that's a really good place to be in. And so visibility, I can see, can increase. We will be displacing. It's not only just newly trained guards coming out of Templemore, but it's also then members who will be displaced in effect from administrative roles or other roles out onto the ground and the frontline roles. The only thing I would say about the visibility piece is that more and more of our work is actually not in a visible space, and a lot of the crimes against the vulnerable happen in a private space. And so thinking towards violence towards children online and child abuse online, thinking then around things like domestic abuse, serious sexual assault. That requires specialist intervention, specialist investigators, and a lot of that is actually hidden from the public in terms of seeing visibility on the ground. And when I talk about visibility, with one eye, I'm also keeping an eye on how demand and the demand for our services are going to change.
Yeah, you more than most people will know the complexity of policing the border. If it is the case that we have a hard border on this island, and that's something that none of us in this room can predict with certainty, but if it is the case that that's going to happen in next year, are the Gardaí prepared for that? Do you have the resources to deal with that?
Well, we are an organisation that's growing. We're an organisation which is appropriately staffing those border divisions and districts, even as we speak. So later in November, we will have another 180 odd staff or members will graduate from Templemore and go out to stations throughout the country. So we are staffing that appropriately as we see the threats at this moment in time. I think there's sort of three areas of concern. And the first area is, I think, just the local policing and local reassurance and confidence that people will have. And I know that the Police Service of Northern Ireland are also concerned about this, that people will be worried and have a fear if they're living close to the border, in effect, that there's this sort of area that be raided from backwards and forwards, and the fear of crime and the travelling criminal crossing the border. But there's also then just the reality of nightlife, say in Derry, where there's a lot of people travel, young people travel across the border, engage in nightlife there, but also then there's attendant crime as well, and just managing those scenarios where you could have serious crime committed in one jurisdiction and the perpetrators then are in this jurisdiction. How do we manage then the evidential issues that surround from that? So that's how we want to know how well the European treaties are going to, and particularly around criminal justice, are going to withstand Brexit, or what will go in its place. Organised crime as well then, because obviously any change in trading tariffs gives opportunities then for smugglers to make illicit profit, or the evasion of tax or duty. So that there's an organised crime element of that, and any organised crime element on the border will also then provide some additional element of funding to terrorist groups, dissident Republicans in particular. But there's also, and it's been already commented upon, that they might use this as an emotional driver for their particular campaigns, but obviously we want to avoid anything like that at all. We want to avoid them having being able to use this in effect as a rallying call. But there's three elements of this, and there's a lot of focus on a hard border in terms of the threat of terrorism, but there's two other elements as well which are equally important. But we as an organisation have engaged with the Police Service of Northern Ireland really since the Brexit vote in respect of this, and we have plans in place, but still yet we're not quite sure what the nature of the Brexit's going to be, and so there is an unknown element of this, and we've prepared as best we can for that.
Okay, just finally, have you ever heard of a place called Step Aside?
Yes, I have heard of Step Aside, yes.
Tell me what you know about it.
Well, I believe it's one of 6 stations which we're presently in the process of reopening. And when we reopen it and staff it, then we will see then what impact that has had, local crime and local confidence in the Guards. I think one of the things about Step Aside is obviously the local people had a great affection for it and wanted back, and raised protest in respect of its closure, and we've responded in terms of the reopening of it.
And that was a decision you made?
Well, I think the decision was sort of waiting for my arrival there, but yes, but I stand over the decision. I can see the logic of doing it, and it goes to the station closure. Like people obviously take a lot of comfort from having local guards, and in some ways, it would be absolutely wrong for the organisation or for I to ignore that.
Okay, thanks very much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Deputy O'Callaghan. And the next member is Deputy Donegal O'Leary, please.
Thank you very much for coming for us, Commissioner Harris, and your colleagues. Congratulate you and wish you the best of luck in your position. I think it's you taking the position at a time of great change, following on from, I think it's fair to say, several controversies which have unfortunately undermined to an extent public confidence in the institution as a whole. Notwithstanding that, I believe that in the vast majority of cases the local Garda remains somebody who enjoys great trust from the people, and the people have great faith in. People want to see more Gardaí in their community. It's also a time that has a lot of potential, as while I don't agree with every single one of the recommendations in the Commission on the Future Policing Report, I think there are many positive elements which can modernise and transform policing. That brings me to my first question, and one of the major priorities in the recommendations was the emphasis on community policing. I'm a big fan of the community policing model. I think I possibly have a slightly contrary view to Deputy Brophy in that I actually think that the model such as it is works reasonably well where it is resourced correctly, but unfortunately the number of dedicated community Gardaí has fallen by about 40% since 2010 or 2011 or so. So I think that has unfortunately undermined the model. So I suppose my question first of all is, do you intend to make policing with the community a core priority of your time as Commissioner, and do you favour the use of dedicated community Gardaí to ensure that the model is restored?
Well, the short answer to both of those questions is yes. We will be an organisation which focuses on community policing. All of us will have a community policing ethos. I recognise what you say in terms of the local confidence there is in the local Gardaí, and I want to build on that and make sure that is enhanced going forward. One of the routes into that is community policing. As we work out in part our new divisional and district structure, then an integral part of that will be how we will police with the community in that particular district division. And so there will be a focus on the local policing service delivery will be focused on the district. And part of that will be how are we managing the community policing element within that particular district. So you can have assurance of that, and I've already seen the initial plans about what divisions will look like going forward, and that's built into those. So how are we managing the local accountability, local responsiveness, and dealing with people's concerns at a local level. So that's a given. Community policing, as I've said already, in some areas there'll be a specialism depending upon the demand. You can obviously see that in the urban areas. In rural areas it may be more of a hybrid model where we'll just regard all of our response officers in effect having a community responsibility, but also having to attend calls as well. And I had the privilege to be in one of our small towns and 2 weeks ago, and the local guard, he also answered calls, but everybody we spoke to, he knew on first names, and he introduced me to dozens of people, and that is community policing, where everybody knows him by name, and he was able to identify and speak with and know a lot of individuals. So that's what we want to build on. We don't want to lose that, but we have the opportunity, particularly as we're an organisation of growth, but we're also an organisation displacing people into the front line, that we can build on that.
Very well. I suppose I take that on board, but I would emphasise, I suppose, my own personal view at least, that I think there is, in terms of that knowledge of the community, there is a role for a specific dedicated community Gardaí in districts, and at the district level particularly. I want to ask you, just in relation to, I suppose in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been of particular concern to the public the issue of serious and organised crime. Now I have to say, and I will give significant credit to the Gardaí, significant headway I believe has been made.
Yes.
in the last 12 months in particular, perhaps
Yes.
a little over that. But nonetheless, it's an area that still contains very significant challenges. It's particularly concentrated in a number of particular communities that have been, I think it's fair to say, tormented by this scourge. And there's also an international element to it. So it's a big, big challenge for the Gardaí. So I want to ask you, how will you address these matters as Commissioner? What initiatives will you take, and how will you prioritise this?
Well, I recognise very much the very good work that I have seen since my arrival, and I point to extensive seizures of both drugs, but also money, and I'd also then point to the work of the Criminal Assets Bureau, and only on Monday I saw the list of cases that they had, and ran to 3 or 4 dozen cases of individuals that they were pursuing in terms of seizing criminal assets. So there is really good work going on. But to address the overall question, when you're dealing with such determined organised crime groups, you do need to come at it at a number of levels. One element of that is community policing. So in effect, organised crime always puts a foot down somewhere. It leaves a trace in a local community, and it leaves a bad trace there. And in part, when I talk about critical neighbourhoods where there's high demand, I do mean areas where organised crime gangs may try to find shelter, or where they would try to impose their writ on the local community. So a lot of our community policing will be about those areas to undermine, in effect, their legend, their story. There's the national response that we would have, and as I say, great work has been done around both seizures of money, drugs, but also bringing individuals before the courts, and there's been some very significant convictions. On the international piece then, we enjoy good relations with our international partners. They are engaged with us. We've had great support both from Europol, from the USA in terms of the Drugs Enforcement Agency and other federal law enforcement there, and from the UK's National Crime Agency, and indeed on the island of Ireland from the Police Service of Northern Ireland. So once you can muster those sorts of resources and the different elements that they can bring to bear, as an international entity, you can start to really degrade and break down a crime gang, and there's a focus on them, and that focus does bring results and is bringing results. So there's three ways into this, and I think we've shown successes around that. But the community policing one is one there where we want to have a particular emphasis about those estates and those areas where they have particular influence, that we take back that ground in effect.
Very well. Commissioner, upon your appointment, several victims groups expressed significant reservations after you were named as the incoming Commissioner. In particular, some of those groups expressed some anger at the fact that they viewed you as somebody who would block their access to truth and justice when you were the key person within the PSNI responsible for legacy issues. To a large extent, this relates to the High Court decision in July 2017, in which Justice Tracy found in the High Court that you took decisions which were not compliant with Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and frustrated any possibility that there would be an effective overarching investigation into the Glenanne gang cases, who were responsible for dozens of deaths, perhaps over 100. Justice Tracy found this as an abuse of power, and that evidence that the state is not genuinely committed to investigating collusion. I want to ask you, do you accept that decision, and how do you intend to address the concerns of victims and demonstrate that you will be a Commissioner who will work with and support victims in seeking truth and justice, and to ask you if you will meet with these victims groups to address and discuss their concerns with them?
In respect of the July 2017, that judgment was addressed to the Chief Constable, and the Chief Constable is in the appeal process, so it's entirely, it would be wrong for me to comment in matters which are still seized by higher courts in respect of that particular judgment. In terms of the wider point, yes, of course, I will work with the various coroner's inquests and other avenues which are ongoing at the moment in Northern Ireland around inquiring into matters during the Troubles. And we already have a process which is underway. We're assisting, for instance, Operation Canova, and only recently I viewed papers then which we had supplied also then to the coroner in an inquest. So that is an ongoing process, and as a government agency, as a police service, obviously we are about assisting the judicial investigation and judicial inquiry. And then your last point in respect of meeting victims, of course, yes, I will meet with victims. There's no issue there, and indeed I have invitations pending in terms of meetings with various victims groups.
Very well, and I'm pleased to hear that. In relation to the Commission on the Future of Policing report, that's been discussed already to an extent, and I think while I have some issues with some of the specific recommendations in relation particularly to the policing authority, what I would say is in terms of ability to deliver reform, because the policing authority has expressed very serious concerns that the Garda Renewal and Modernisation programme is not fit for purpose, and that not only is the pace of reform too slow, but that the very vehicle and mechanism set up by the Gardaí for reform is not delivering. And they said on the 9th of August, if the Garda Síochána does not at this juncture pause to reconsider in a determined and focused way the end to which its efforts and resources are being directed, as well as what key enablers and levers it needs to achieve that change, then it's the authority's view that a continuation of the current activity and effort, however well intentioned, will not deliver the fundamental reform envisaged by government. So essentially that is questioning whether the Gardaí is properly set up in terms of the vehicle it's set out to deliver reform, both in terms of the Garda Inspectorate reports that are, I suppose, a few years old now, and the Commission on Future Policing document. So are you happy with the Garda Modernisation and Renewal programme, and do you believe that the Gardaí is capable of delivering the kind of reforms outlined in the report?
Well, there's a lot of work that's gone into the modernisation and renewal programme, and indeed some of the, and I'm arriving to see some of the benefits in terms of the investigation management system being introduced in the new year, the computer-aided rostering system, also then computer-aided dispatch, which deliver on command and control. But these are big IT projects, and they're big IT projects been landed into, in effect, a public organisation where we have multiple systems and pretty complex systems at that as well. I think it would be a challenge for anyone to deliver. In effect, we have a lot just around. If you just look at the digital strategy, there's a lot underway there. But beyond that, then we also have the human resources piece, which is really workforce modernisation. Again, that's a huge project as well in terms of expanding the organisation and the training that's required. And in fact, for every new guard that comes in, the training investment in that individual, plus then the displacement or bringing Garda staff in to displace others to the front line. So there's a lot of plates spinning. I think probably we need more support in terms of the financial skills and the human resources skills, and we're working up what that would look like at this moment in time. But that's well recognised within the organisation as well, that we need more expertise. But the Commission on the Future of Policing has described, in effect, an end point for us. They have described what the model of policing should be going forward, and now it's for us to deliver on that. And it's not in variance to the MRP. It's some areas it leaves a lot of discretion, and it knows a lot about the work that was ongoing. Obviously, the Commission took a lot of time to look at the MRP, and so really the Commission builds on and will guide the work which has already started. So I'm not so pessimistic, no. If you have a clear idea where you're going, you need to be obviously realistic about what's in your way and what needs to be resolved, what the problems are. But I think I can be optimistic about what might be done, because it's now become very clear to us and to the policing authority all that needs to happen to make these changes, and they are complex. You know, we've staff issues to deal with. We've also the skills of those staff to deal with in terms of their training. We have to look at our own structures in terms of how we deliver policing, and then the style of that policing as well. So there's a lot to do, but we've already made a start, and we're standing on good foundations with a lot of government support as well.
Very well. I suppose in addition to some of the concerns raised by victims, there was concerns raised by a variety of sources in relation to issues of national security, particularly given that you had overall responsibility for intelligence within the PSNI and were its liaison officer with MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence agency, and that you're now responsible for significant areas of state security. My question on this is threefold. Firstly, what is your understanding of the security responsibilities you have currently within An Garda Síochána? Secondly, how do you respond to concerns expressed by persons such as Michael C. Murphy, former head of military intelligence, that it's not possible to do adequate security checks on persons from outside their jurisdiction? And do you believe that there is any contradiction between ongoing obligations under the UK Official Secrets Act and the Irish Official Secrets Act?
Okay. Well, in respect of the security checks, I'm an individual who was subjected to a very high level of vetting for 2 decades, just because of various roles that I held, and that vetting, which was constantly under renewal, was still in place for me and still live. So what happens is that, and I've had to do it for other individuals who have transferred from PSNI to An Garda Síochána, that the Chief Constable provided an assurance in respect of that vetting, and indeed my vetting certificates were provided to An Garda Síochána as demonstration of that. And the vetting is there to make sure that you're not open to being coerced or blackmailed or whatever it might be, and that there are no issues surrounding your private life or affiliations which could give concern. So it's a very thorough process, both financial and your private life checks as well. So I've undergone that vetting process and been subject to it. You don't do it once; you're subject to it constantly. So there's no issue about the level to which I've been vetted. And that was in effect resolved by the normal channels. The obligations that I have to the Official Secrets Act here are similar than I would have had to the UK's Official Secrets Act. But in effect, when I left the Police Service of Northern Ireland in early August, I stopped then being an individual who was a member of the Police Service, and then on the 3rd of September I swore my oath in the role of Commission, and I undertook then within that to defend and secure the state in line with the Constitution and the requirements required of me, and those are obligations that I take very seriously. Now, I've answered questions previously in respect of this. Any matters that I'm aware of, then they were always dealt with properly in terms of sharing information with An Garda Síochána when I was serving with the Police Service of Northern Ireland. So, I have no reservations about any of my time when I was in charge of crime operations. So, a lot of this has been pointed towards me, but actually I'm not quite really sure what the issue is. There was one police service dealing with another police service in Garda Síochána, and that was the course of how events happened throughout that time.
Very well. I'll ask 2 supplementaries if I can, but there was a third element to that question as well, which is what's your understanding of your current responsibilities leave aside what's recommended in Commission on Future Policing, but what's your understanding and current responsibilities in terms of intelligence? I suppose, in addition, just to, if you can clarify, I presume, notwithstanding what you said, and I absolutely accept that you have undertaken your obligations and your oath and so on in the fullest of integrity and comprehensively, but it is still the case that you remain bound by both pieces of legislation as an ex-employer and employee on an ongoing basis. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I'm bound by that legislation, by the UK's Official Secrets Act, but after my tenure as Commissioner, I'll also then, for life, be bound then by the Official Secrets Act here as well. And such is how these functions, or that's just as the legislation works. I honestly don't see where the problem arises. You're talking about our near neighbour, which, and the Police Service of Northern Ireland, when I worked there, I would say we had very much, if not exactly the same, outlook in terms of dealing with both terrorism and organised crime. I worked very closely with my colleagues in Garda Síochána throughout my time as Assistant Chief Constable for Crime, and information was shared constantly, daily, backwards and forwards, all the time. We enjoyed good relationships. But I didn't have a responsibility for national security in Northern Ireland. I do have a responsibility here for national security and securing the state, not only from the threats of terrorism, but also from the threats of espionage, and I have a responsibility also then for counter-espionage. And those two responsibilities are responsibilities which are new to me compared to the role that I've had in the Police Service of Northern Ireland. I undertake them very seriously and almost on a daily basis, and briefed on matters and aware of the operations which are ongoing.
Very well. I suppose, I don't know that you fully answered the final question, so I might ask it, or I suppose the third is the first set of questions, so I might ask it in a different way if I can,
yes,
if that's possible. And just to say as well, I don't think that necessarily needs to be a problem. I think it's still important that we're clear in terms of procedure and due diligence and so on. But perhaps to ask the question another way, what is the division of labour between the intelligence responsibilities of Garda Síochána and other intelligence agencies in this jurisdiction? What's the division of labour?
Well, we are the primary body responsible for the protection of the state in terms of national security. That is that is a prime responsibility of Garda Síochána. There's no equivocation of that.
Okay, thanks. I suppose just final two questions, with your indulgence, Chair. Thanks. You've responded already to the publication of the Disclosures Tribunal, which I think it's fair to say contains some extraordinary conclusions. And just to briefly enumerate, the Disclosures Tribunal was convinced that there was a campaign of calumny by former Garda Commissioner Martin Callanan against Maurice McCabe. Found he was actively aided by former Garda Press Officer Superintendent David Taylor, and that they were in it together, and that Maurice McCabe was repulsively denigrated for being no more than a good citizen and a police officer. It also found that Garda Síochána needs a complete turnaround in their attitude, which has to be led by senior management. So I suppose I want to ask you to respond to that, and firstly, how you intend to lead that complete turnaround. You've made reference in your opening statement to the Code of Ethics. How do you intend to lead the culture change that is required, and how do you intend to ensure that Garda Síochána is an organisation that is open, supportive and accepting of whistleblowers who come forward and highlight wrongdoing?
Cultural change comes from behavioural change, and my behaviour and the behaviours of my senior leadership team have a dramatic impact on the organisation. There's no doubt about that. So the first place you look to is what are the standards that I set, and what are the standards then I expect from the senior leadership team, and how then they spread out through the organisation. There's no point in me saying one thing and doing another. I can't talk to a sergeant or inspector about their behaviours if they're able to point down and say, well, that's hypocrisy on your part, because look at that, look at X, Y, or Z. So it's very clear that the Code of Ethics is the bedrock of our behaviours. I take every opportunity to emphasise that. I take every opportunity to emphasise that people need to live those behaviours, but also then we wish to follow through in terms of improving, or well, actually completely overhauling our discipline code, which creates an atmosphere perhaps of people fearing discipline as opposed to proper management intervention, guidance, and a learning organisation, as opposed to an organisation which is punitive towards its staff. So there is as well structural systemic changes that we need to make about how the organisation is run as well. But I have also emphasised that if any individual in the organisation wishes to come forward and wishes, in effect, to whistleblow or to make a disclosure, then that will be treated with the utmost seriousness. And indeed, I'm open to individuals should they wish to speak to me in terms of being whistleblowers. And people talk about cultural change. The place you start first is around the behaviours that you expect in the organisation. We've been very clear in terms of the introduction of the Code of Ethics, what we see those behaviours being, and now it's up for me, but it's also up for the rest of the senior leadership in the organisation to start to live those and see those behaviours through in terms of the impact it has in the rest of the organisation.
Very well. I suppose I just emphasise before my final question, I think that is a vitally important point. I think it is, I think people were really shocked, to be honest. I think, even though perhaps maybe some of the testimony might have flagged it up, but I think people were very much shocked at, the strength of the finding against Martin Callanan, that somebody in such a position as that could be responsible for a campaign of that nature. And I think it's vitally important that is never repeated, and that the Gardaí, as I say, is an organisation that will support whistleblowers. My final question is in relation to the issue of overtime, and I've raised this with the Minister on a number of occasions. You have instituted what I think is nearly, really, I suppose, a moratorium, or effectively a ban on overtime, as I understand it, between now and the end of the year. It has to be cleared by two of the most senior Gardaí in the state in order to be sanctioned. That's a significant chunk of the year. There was a similar ban, I think, at Christmas last year, but this is obviously much lengthier. And there is a reduced budget, I believe, for, even from a starting line, there is a reduced budget for overtime for 2019. Now, I recognise that Garda budgets are under severe pressure. I recognise that in the abstract there probably is too much being spent on overtime, but that is caused by very real gaps that exist across a number of districts. And, like, according to the PQs that I've seen, most Garda districts are still at or below 2011 levels. So I think it is because of gaps that districts are relying on overtime to deliver what is essential policing works. And as it happens, I was canvassing yesterday in the south side of Dublin, and two issues were flagged up to me in relation to problems this is causing. One operation in Inchicore, which was targeting a number of people who were involved in attacks that appeared to be racially motivated. And there was an issue in Drimna as well, where on foot of a call to a station on foot of serious antisocial behaviour, this was not responded to, as there were not adequate numbers of Gardaí to safely respond to this issue. Now, you won't be aware of the specific details of that, so I don't expect you to respond to that, but it's just examples that have been flagged with me. What I want to ask you is, are you absolutely confident that this won't have a very significant impact on the quality of policing and the ability of Gardaí to respond to crime between now and the end of the year, particularly with any potential spike in crime or public order issues or burglaries and so on that often arise around the December period?
Over time, sometimes it's a motive topic, actually, and it shouldn't really be. We received a budget at the start of the year, and we overspent the budget. Corrective action had to be taken, and that's my responsibility. I'm an accounting officer. This is public money, and I have to show the good management of it. So there is still per roster, which is every 4 weeks, approximately 7.2, 7.3 million euro available for overtime. So it isn't an absolute moratorium. We've covered, we believe, our essential areas, but also then we've kept a small pool in the middle for emergencies or indeed pre-planned operations, and people bid into Caoimhghín Deputy in terms of releasing of funds, overtime funds for those operations. Regrettably, overtime has grown quite considerably over the last number of years, and I do feel an obligation that I have to get a rope around it and understand what it's been spent on and what actually I'm getting for that overtime, because it is a growing organisation, and the number of actual staff hours I have for policing is growing all the time with each release of individuals from the training college. So I have to think carefully about overtime, because it can quickly suck the ability of you to be proactive in other areas and spend money on things like training or equipment or other vital areas. And so I'm not apologising for the cutting overtime. I regret if it's having an impact on operations, but at the same time, that hasn't been conveyed to me. People, our managers, are living within the overtime that's been provided to them. Now, it will probably be a feature going forward, but we haven't finalised the budget for 2019. That overtime will remain in around those sorts of figures, but we will have to manage that accordingly going forward. And as I emphasise, we have a budget over 90 million for hopefully next year for overtime, but you can quickly overspend that, and then it starts to suck money out of other projects that you want to push forward, and that's just not where we want to be. We need to be managing that, because it takes away my ability to do other things which are very important as well.
Thank you, Deputy O'Leary. Caoimhghín, I'm going to...
Well, just to thank the Commissioner for your responses, and I suppose just to briefly say I appreciate you coming in, and for myself and for the committee, I suppose it's our responsibility to hold you to account, but also to work with you and to support you in your work, and I look forward to doing that.
Thank you, Deputy O'Leary. And just to indicate again, members, I call you as I see you, and the simple little thing is just a hand up. It applies to everybody equally here. And the next person I saw, and I'm now asking to take the floor, is Deputy Jack Chambers, please.
Thanks, Chair, and like the others, I want to welcome new Commissioner and his team, and thank you for coming before us, and I wish you well going forward. Just the first question relates to the Policing Commission report, and you've referenced it in your statement. From your first 2 months, how do you see the current policing, oversight architecture working? I know one of the, I suppose, complaints, or one of the things in the future Policing Commission report and other reports, is that there are many bodies under which you're held to account, and you've outlined that accountability in public is important to you. There's obviously new offices being proposed in terms of independent office at the Police Commission, a Policing and Community Oversight Commission. We've got the Policing Authority, you've got the inspectors, you've got GSOC and all that mix, you've got potentially a new board. Where do you see this moving? I know it's a government decision about what architecture is around you. Do you think it's presently too complicated? Would you like to see it simplified, obviously upholding the public accountability that you mentioned, or perhaps you'd like to comment on that?
Well, undoubtedly the landscape at the moment is complex, and I spent as a chief officer a long time, 12 years, being held to account by the policing board in Belfast, and also then subject to investigation and working also with the police ombudsman. But so I'm well used to vigorous and rigorous public public accountability and investigation. And that brings a lot of benefits in terms of public confidence and also dealing then with difficult issues it brings, and objectivity, and also then can deal with complaints that the policing service itself has been subjective in its view on how to go forward. I suppose in terms of what the Commission has recommended, as I've already said, I don't want to comment specifically on those recommendations. We will be making commentary into government in terms of our view, but I would say we still have the policing authority, we still have the ombudsman, we still have the inspectorate, and all of those are set up in legislation. They have their responsibilities, which are set out in legislation as well, and we have to be responsible in terms of working with them going forward. And it is, our position, without any equivocation, that accountability, independent investigation, oversight, all of those are very important for the role that we provide, and are central in terms of performance of what we do, but also in promoting public confidence in what we do as well, and also then a very useful sounding board and route actually to get the public's opinion on matters. So whatever happens, we would wish to see rigorous accountability, that accountability adding towards public confidence in what we do, but also then providing us good, viable feedback that we can use to improve the service as well.
Okay. As I said, I know that's you mentioned that public accountability is important. Justice, and I understand you don't want to comment, but I know you've obviously the link in with the Department of Justice, and there's been recommendations about separating that. You're obviously here. There's a lot of channels and oversight and accountability, and I suppose maybe it'll be what you submit privately to government, but I think my own view is that there should be some streamlining of that, so you're not getting direction from 20 different places, and that you can, that oversight can work in that regard. So I think that was just something that came out of the Policing Commission report, but I appreciate you don't want to go into your full thoughts on it. Just my next question relates to IT systems and Pulse. What are your thoughts on Pulse from the first 2 months in the job? The latest edition of Pulse 7.3. 7.3. It's up to 7.3. So I know Pulse gets a bad press, but it's like any of these big IT systems, it starts to evolve, and the Pulse we have at 7.3 will be very different from several iterations ago. And we can already see that some of the systemic issues that we've had with earlier editions of Pulse have started to fade away and diminish. We've also put a lot of effort into the quality of our data, and we have a lot of work to do in respect of that. But that is a point of emphasis for me and for the rest of the organisation, because that data then determines then how we should use our resources and how best we should use our resources. So I know Pulse in itself, have said to me it's unwieldy and difficult. But as a user and as an important organisation that uses it, we are always thinking about what's the next iteration of it, how should we improve it, and how we should expand it as well. But we have other systems coming online as well. The investigation management system in particular, I think can be assistance there, but also then computer-aided dispatches you've talked about as well. So the challenge then is that these systems can communicate with each other and start to populate things on through. But these are complex. These are complex programs, and any product we buy, inevitably we're not the only single user of it, and we have to work with others in terms of putting forward for new additions, for new changes, and working those through then with the suppliers. Just to clarify, and when Pulse is used, there's no remote. Is there remote access to Pulse? So say you have a Garlic. There is, yeah. General, yeah, no, just in terms of the input of data, I know previously people said there's sometimes a gap between when, say, an incident occurred and when the data was submitted. What's the, how does that work in an operational sense? Say, if an incident occurred, if data can be submitted kind of on the scene or as things occur, does that occur in real time, or is the data submitted a day or two afterwards?
There is a facility and ability for that to be done in real time. That work has been done in the background primarily, and some of it we have tested and piloted our mobility programme down in the Limerick division, and these people down there have handheld devices.
That's good,
and they can use an input, and they have real-time information at the point and at the time that they require it, which is at the roadside. So it all improves the processes in which they can make the decisions that they're required to make. It also, we have done some work in terms of looking at how that will extend and roll out. So we have developed a series of apps. So I think, as has been pointed out, Pulse continues to adapt, to change, to evolve, to become more agile, to enable us in An Garda Síochána and provide the information to the people on the front line. And as I say, we have tested and piloted that. We have completed the proof of concept in a pilot division. And I think that will develop considerably over the next 12 months.
So I think that's very positive, because to have that real-time input, I think, will help your own data. And also, I mean, obviously when there's a gap between, say, the operational, people's out in the field versus being at a desk, that's sometimes where there's a mismatch between data submissions. So I think that's very welcome. I know other police forces, and particularly, I know the US is always the first with IT, but they go around with their handheld device, I think, all the time. And I think it's good to see that Pulse is moving along that. Just around data itself, when do you expect obviously, I know from your last appearance here, there's a mention of your ongoing engagement with the CSO around data, and there's a disagreement there, or they won't fully approve. They've put in qualification on the data that's submitted. When do you expect that to be resolved, or can you provide an update on that?
I met actually with senior officials of the CS only this week, and I think we are subject to report by CSO, and that's showing improvement in terms of the quality of data, and they would acknowledge that. But I think from their part, and entirely independent, obviously, of myself, that they have to be absolutely assured that we've made sufficient improvement, and that improvement is built into systems and is going to last, and they have assurance of that. So I don't have a time scale as to when we'll achieve that point. We have put our own systems in place. Certainly there is an improvement in data. I think the next thing we have to look to is clarity around our own crime counting rules, and they've pointed towards that as well. We've also appointed then an interim chief data officer who's an expert in the field, and they're assisting us in terms of what our strategic approach should be, what else we have to do with our systems to ensure the quality of the data. But data is essential now in modern policing, as I've said. We have a focus on this, and we want to get to a place where this qualification no longer exists. And we're working towards that, and the improvements have been acknowledged. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
Just following up on Deputy Leary's point around overtime and the overspend there. I remember we had the Minister before this committee a number of months ago, and we flagged this as an issue whereby the planned overtime allocation for the Gardaí this year was cut from the actual spend last year. And obviously the overtime that was utilised or provided for last year was important in the context of organised crime or various operations. Have you had any discussions with the Minister around wanting to bridge the gap, or is your focus on trying to drive, as you mentioned earlier, drive better value for what you're allocated? I know from, people have mentioned that there are concerns that with some type of overtime cuts that it will have an impact on frontline policing, and maybe, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little further, or would you be looking for additional overtime next year, or do you think given a sufficient budget?
Well, An Garda Síochána gets a lot of money. It's a big budget. We get a big slice of public persons, taxpayers' money, and I have a responsibility as a accounting officer to make sure that it's used efficiently, effectively, I'm clear about my role and what I have to do. If we have pressing, operational requirement for additional resources, then obviously I would make the case. But at the moment, what I'm planning to do is live within the budget that I was provided for in 2019. That's a responsibility placed upon me, and I'm not starting out the year thinking I'm going to have to ask for more somewhere down the line, and that wouldn't be responsible on my part. So, but negotiations are still ongoing about the budget for 2019, and we haven't reached a final position as yet. I suppose the wider point has to be made as well, is that in terms of our operational footprint, other things are happening other than overtime, and we've touched upon the size, the amount of actual uniform guards is increasing, but also then beyond that, we're recruiting Garda staff to displace other officers' members out onto the front line as well. So there's, it's not just about the overtime, and if you took the overtime as part of the, and indeed, when I looked at actually even this slight tightening of the belt for the end of the year, it wasn't even hardly a percentage point. It wasn't a percentage point of our overall budget. It was a small cut in our expenditure, and it seemed to me entirely prudent, given the position that we were in, which was one of overspend, that we would try and retrieve as much of that overspend as we could. Next question relates to supervision, and then across all the reports there's a mention of the gap that's there, and that was something around, say, sergeant inspector level. Are you satisfied? I know there are significant gaps still around. I know there's been some promotions, and when there are promotions, there are gaps. When do you expect to have, I suppose, filled a lot of the vacant positions to ensure that we have appropriate supervision across all the divisions? And can you provide an update on that? Well, we've recently promoted 172 to the rank of sergeant. So the vacancies that existed at that time then were filled. We will soon have an inspectors list, and we'll make probably over 100 promotions there, we hope, in terms of sergeant to inspector, and then there will be a further pull through of promotions to sergeant. And I think one of the concentrations we have in the organisation is that frontline supervision, the sergeant inspector supervision, and there is an emphasis on that. It certainly is emphasised to us in the various reports that have been written, both by the inspectorate, comments by the authority, and also in the Commission on the Future Policing as well. And so we take it very seriously. Supervision is essential in terms of the behaviours and standards that we expect in the organisation. And again, I think I'm fortunate to arrive at a time when these gaps, which have opened up and have been considerable, are really starting to be filled, and that makes a difference. And in lots of ways, it creates optimism within the organisation. It's a nice day, and it was a very positive day in the organisation to make that announcement, and then several weeks later to see people, newly promoted sergeants, in their first or second day in their new posts, and that was very positive. Yeah, just final question. Some of the questions you received in the last contribution were querying your vetting, they were querying your background. Have you felt subjected to some degree of, I know the Minister mentioned sectarian prejudice, and I wonder myself, if you were from Australia or Spain or Germany or America, would you be subject to the same tone of questioning? Have you felt that certain elements are trying to undermine your position?
Just if I may,
yes,
Commissioner, just to make a point, there was nothing in the previous contribution that had any overt or even suggested sectarian element to it at no time. And in fact, knowing the Deputy personally, it would be utterly and absolutely anathema to him to be associated with such remarks. And I would hope, I do believe, in fact, I will affirm that I do believe that the Commissioner accepted that and took the questions in good stead and answered accordingly. And I thank him for that.
No, here I've addressed questions which have been the subject of much commentary, and I think some of that commentary has been ill-founded, and I have set out that, right at the very start, I set out that I'm here to serve the people of Ireland. I've accepted and I've been appointed to the role of Commissioner. I swore an oath, and that oath is important to me. I'm here to serve, and I'm here to protect the people of Ireland. What I bring are the experience and skills that I learnt in my time, 34 years of police service in Northern Ireland and the RUC before that. But overall, and actually without fail, the welcome I've received has been complete and wholesome, and the welcome received both in the organisation and then any members of the public that I meet has been complete and wholesome. And in some ways, it's been very moving for me in the manner in which I've been received. And I think back to the National Plan Championships, for instance, there, where I've felt really welcome, well received, and I have to say that within the organisation as well, I feel very welcome and been well received as well. And hopefully I've been able to give the opportunity to dispel maybe some of the concerns there is, in effect, in appointing someone from outside the jurisdiction, but strangely of this island, and to this position as well. So hoping to do that.
Well, that's okay, Senator. We've dealt with the matter. I beg your pardon. Thank you, Deputy Chambers, and thank you, Commissioner Harris. I'll now invite Senator Martin Conway, please.
Caoimhghín, and absolutely, I think that your welcome, Commissioner, is absolutely embodied by everybody in the country, and I have to say, so far you appear to be doing quite a good job, and you're doing quite a lot in terms of building confidence. And I suppose you're in the job now 2 months, and I would ask you, in that number of weeks, have you uncovered anything that has been disturbing to you? Has something or anything been brought to your attention that has raised a serious red flag that you wouldn't have known previously, that wouldn't have been made available to you in the initial briefings? Have you unearthed anything that we should be concerned about, or that you are concerned about?
Well, I think, when you run any large organisation, it's a complex organisation, and it's dealing with all sorts of issues. Huge continuum of demand comes in through the door. That you're always going to see things you think, well, that's not right. That needs to be improved upon, and you can never get to an end point with such a complex business where you think, right, okay, my work here is done. That is not going to happen. We are on a constant cycle of improvement, and that's what I want to emphasise. That where we see something and identify it, then we take actions to deal with it, to ameliorate the problem, and then move on from that. And so, probably that's what I've seen. And I don't want to highlight any particular area, because everything I've seen are not things that I've discovered. They're things that have come up through the management processes, things that have come up through the senior leadership team meetings that we have and been brought to my attention. And so, like any organisation, we are identifying what we need to do. Some of that is through a risk management process, and where we need to go next. Then, but We've talked about data quality, but that's well on the agenda. We've talked about the digitisation of policing, but again, that's well on the agenda as well.
Yeah, I suppose I'm not coming at this with any information that I have that I believe you should have or anything like that.
Right.
It's not motivated in that, but I am on this committee, I think, longer than anybody else, and I've sat here on numerous occasions with the last 2 commissioners where information was not put in the public domain in a timely fashion when it was discovered. And I would sincerely hope that moving forward, that if there is serious malpractice that's uncovered, that at the first available opportunity it would be made known to this committee and to the policing authority and the other relevant agencies, because I think openness and transparency is something that needs to change within An Garda Síochána. It hasn't up until now, but I certainly feel that we're moving very much in the right direction. So I suppose my purpose of asking the question is to give you an opportunity, if there was something significant, that you could make the committee aware of it, or at least put it in the public domain through this committee. So obviously there isn't. So just moving forward then in terms of...
Is he right, Commissioner? We just need to clarify that.
Well, I think what I was trying to intimate was, no, it's not perfect, but I didn't expect to find perfection. Sure. So there is a lot of improvement needed in areas, no doubt about that. But I think from already the debate we've had, that those are well known, and those are areas that we're active in addressing.
Okay, some of the questions I was going to ask about Garda over time, and certainly ICT, have been asked by Jack and Donncha and others, so there's no point in going over that ground. So I just come on to, I suppose, the last set of concerns that I have, and that is, I suppose, in terms of the Disclosures Tribunal, and I think it's well documented, what the recommendations were, and to be fair, you came out very quickly and you made your own position known on that. I'd like to know, have you at this stage met Sergeant Maurice McCabe, and since the Disclosures Tribunal, have you had a conversation with him?
I spoke to him on the phone on the afternoon, the Thursday afternoon of its publication, but I'm seeing him now this afternoon, actually, as the way it turns out. Okay,
well, that's very positive. Are you satisfied now that there is proper mechanisms in place for whistleblowers within the system, and that if somebody does have concerns and becomes effectively a whistleblower, are you satisfied that there's enough supports within An Garda Síochána to ensure that those people will feel confident in terms of coming forward with their concerns?
Well, I believe so. I have to say, for the organisation, these are very better lessons that have been learnt, but they have been learnt, and I just wish to assure everyone in the organisation that it is a place where they can come forward and raise their concerns, and they will be dealt with appropriately and supported appropriately as well. And just everyone in the organisation can have my absolute assurance in respect of that, and just really want to take this opportunity to re-emphasise that again.
Okay, thank you, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Conway. The next is Senator Niall O'Donnell, please.
Thank you, Commissioner, and you're welcome to this morning's meeting. Just to begin by prefacing my questions, Commissioner, in response to some of the earlier points. The questions certainly that were put to you earlier by my colleague Deputy O'Leary aren't questions that were initially raised by Sinn Féin or our party or any party around this table. They were points and concerns and I think legitimate questions that came from victims' organisations and individual victims themselves. So to try and label fair and legitimate scrutiny and questioning as somehow sectarian, I think just indicates a degree of tone deafness to the complexities of legacy issues that's really off the scale. So to begin my remarks in response to Deputy O'Leary, Commissioner, you made the point about you were almost a wee bit blasé in terms of the concerns around cross-border sharing of information, because you lauded the existing arrangements that are there between the PSNI and the Gardaí around these issues. So one example, and it's good to hear that because it's pertinent to the questions I have. The Dublin and Monaghan bombing in 1974, members of the families there and survivors, Commissioner, are still seeking truth in relation to what happened that day. So I wonder, can you tell us if the Gardaí have been given all of the information they've requested from the PSNI in relation to that case? And if not, what's the current status of the request from the Gardaí to the PSNI in relation to that?
John,
Position, please.
can I refer that to John, please?
I think there's a number of work streams at the moment in relation to a variety of different inquiries, and An Garda Síochána are fully cooperating with each and every one of those. Can I specifically answer the question in relation to the 1974? I can't specifically in relation to that, but I know that that work has been done, and we can certainly send a note to the committee on that. But what I can assure the committee is that there is a lot of work ongoing at the moment between An Garda Síochána and the Police Service of Northern Ireland and with the coroner in Northern Ireland in relation to the provision of information. I know that a lot of information has already been provided in other areas of work that's ongoing, but in relation to that specific one, I will have to provide the committee with the detail around that. But I certainly can assure the committee that all committees are being properly they're getting proper cooperation from An Garda Síochána.
Okay, well, I appreciate the response, and I would appreciate such an update, although I do think families will be quite unsettled by the fact that this level of senior management in the Garda Síochána don't have and aren't alert to the current status.
Well, I'm not sure that's an accurate reflection of what I said. I think what I said was that we have provided information. We have provided a lot of information.
Well, the question is, sorry, whether the PSNI have provided An Garda Síochána with all of the information that's pertinent to the case.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that there is a lot of information that is being exchanged between all of the agencies, An Garda Síochána cooperating with Police Service of Northern Ireland and with the coroner in Northern Ireland and vice versa. And I'm saying that in order that I don't mislead the committee, if we had the question in advance, we would have got all the information and provided it.
Okay.
So it's just as a matter of detail.
Okay, no, well, I take your point on that, and we'll perhaps revisit that then at a later stage. Commissioner, you said, and it was positive that you acknowledged that you would meet victims groups, and there are a number of invitations pending. And obviously, off the back of some of those meetings, and there are some public calls, can you give a reassurance to victims groups that where they do desire An Garda Síochána to take up actively engagement with the PSNI in relation to their cases, that An Garda Síochána will do that on their behalf, were of course appropriate?
Well, yes, of course we're appropriate, and we would seek obviously to cooperate as we do around today's investigations, but also these legacy matters as well. That's a given.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, just regarding the investigation into the death of Dennis Donaldson in April 2006, you'll have perhaps noted the statement from the family's solicitors, Madeline Finucane, who said at the heart of this case is a criminal conspiracy involving state agents in the exposure of Dennis Donaldson as an informer for the RUC, PSNI and MI5, leading to his murder in April 2006. In the cover-up which has followed, Gardaí have invoked, quote, state security to prevent the return of the journal in which Dennis was writing days before his murder. Now, you'll know, Commissioner, that on 22 separate occasions the inquest has been adjourned, and obviously that's causing not only deep distress to Dennis's family, but obviously deep worry and concern to his legal representatives. So in July 2017, the Police Ombudsman in the North confirmed the investigative value of Dennis's journal to his investigation and given explicit undertaking to the Donaldson family to initiate proceedings to recover the journal. But to the present day, Dennis's journal remains in control of the Gardaí, despite confirming it has no evidential value to Gardaí. Will you direct his journal to be provided to the Police Ombudsman in the North? I've
just recently received correspondence to the same effect, and that correspondence is being dealt with, and when we get to a conclusion of that, then I'll obviously report that in as well to the committee. We haven't, but the specific point that you raised has been raised in correspondence from the family's solicitor. So that's alive at this moment, and we will quickly have a response.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Just in relation, turning to Brexit, Commissioner, there was a number of questions put around the issue of community policing, and obviously the worry and concern around a border, and we heard an expression or a reiteration from yourself in relation to that concern, but we haven't heard anything around any mechanical preparations. And I know that's a difficult question because of the uncertain time that we are all in. So perhaps maybe just to nuance it, and it's a similar question I asked the Minister a few weeks ago when he was before us. In relation to Ireland's opt-in to the EU Internal Security Fund, can you give us an assurance that no funds from that opt-in are being directed towards the additional militarisation, infrastructure or mechanics along the border, essentially a hardening of the border?
Well, we would not be engaged in any form of, in effect, of militarisation of the border. We intend to police the border, and as I've said, that will be in terms of the community policing that we have, but we have to also be alive to the concerns of the local communities, and they are real concerns, and they may realise actually in terms of an increased crime, but even beyond that then the threats from organised crime and terrorism. But I will want to check through in the specific fund that you've mentioned, and I'll give you then, I can give the committee a written assurance in respect of that. It seems to me very unlikely, but I want to be 100% in terms of the insurance that I'll provide you.
I'll perhaps follow up with you in writing on that, Commissioner, then, just to give you that bit of space to go and check that out. Because obviously I appreciate what you're saying about the community safety and policing concerns. That's a given, but obviously from a political point of view and a societal point of view, there's obviously one of the biggest concerns is in fact the actual re-emergence of infrastructure along the border as well. So again, to move to kind of slightly...
Well, can I give that assurance that we have no thought whatsoever towards introducing infrastructure of any sort, so in terms of, as you've described it, militarisation of a border, that is just nowhere near our agenda.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I wish I had got as decisive an answer from the Minister a few weeks ago, but that's encouraging nevertheless. Two questions I'll kind of put together, Commissioner. Are you concerned, or do you have any concerns about the resource available to and within the Gardaí in relation to cybercrime? And do you believe the Guards have enough equipment and qualified staff to deal with the threat posed by an increased cybercrime threat? And do you also believe you have enough resources and personnel to tackle white-collar crime, including forensic detectives who are able to address financial crime and impropriety?
May I ask John, because I know John's done a lot of work around both of these areas, just on what our response should be going forward.
In relation to the cybercrime, there's probably three elements and aspects to the work that's ongoing at the moment. We have regionalised a lot of our cybercrime capacity, and we have introduced two already, both in the southeastern region and in the southern region. And we have put additional resources both at regional level and at national level. So there is a programme of work to increase and enhance the capacity from a tactical perspective. From a strategic perspective at national level, we have put a superintendent in charge specifically of cybercrime, and we have boosted the resources available to him. Like any aspect of police work, and probably more than most, cybercrime is evolving and changing quicker than most areas. So this is a constant area that we are paying attention to, and it is constantly evolving. We do a lot of work with academic institutions, with corporate bodies and our European partners. So it's continuing to evolve and continuing to improve. But at the moment, quite a lot of work has gone in to deal with
within the organisation from both a tactical and strategic perspective. We also do a lot of work with the National Cybercrime Centre, and we have a member of Garda Síochána permanently placed down there, working with other agencies. So it's continuing to improve. It's considerably better than it was a year ago and 2 years ago, and it will be considerably better again into the future. It is something that we are keeping under constant evaluation and constant review. In relation to the white collar crime, we have provided additional resources to the Garda Bureau of Fraud Investigation, and again that's something we will keep under review, and where additional resources are required they will continue to be provided.
Okay, thank you. Between January 2016 and August this year, the GSOC received 1,794 reports of Garda use of incapacitating spray, essentially what's known as pepper spray, on suspects. In 80% of the cases, that's 1,566, Garda failed to notify GSOC about using the spray within 48 hours as mandated by internal Garda directives. Some uses of pepper spray were only notified to GSOC up to 2 years after they occurred. So I appreciate a lot of that falls outside of your tenure in office, Commissioner, but I'm sure you would agree that those are very startling figures, they're unsatisfactory figures, and if there are measures even at this stage coming in at the post at this early stage that you can put in place to try and address that and deal with that.
No, absolutely. Entirely unsatisfactory. And maybe there's a thing I hadn't found. That's a matter I wasn't aware of.
So it was worth coming in this morning then?
So I'll pursue that through. No, the reporting the use of force is very important, and actually, our relationship with GSOC and the provision of information to them is actually very important as well. So absolutely, I'll be following through on that.
Okay, Kesh Jarnock. Thanks, Chair. You touched on it this morning, Commissioner, the issue of the Code of Ethics, and at this stage, to the best of my knowledge and the stats that I can obtain, the policing authority was informed by Gardaí management that less than 40% of the force had signed up to the code. Now, you mentioned earlier that everybody will be trained up in relation to the Code of Ethics there, if I caught you right.
Yes.
Is that as a result of a directive or a direction from yourself, organisationally?
The training will be complete by the end of this calendar year. The signing of the Code of Ethics is then another issue then behind that, and I think you alluded to that as well in your question. So my position on that is that everyone in the organisation, it's not just a question of signature. I want them to conceptually and behaviourally have signed up to the Code of Ethics as well. So I'm not going down this sort of diktat you will all sign. I think this is about managers engaging. There's a piece and persuasion and making the argument. Myself and my colleagues are doing this with the representative associations. There's meetings very shortly in respect of that. But I also think when you look at the Charting Tribunal report, that's writ large in that the need for the organisation to demonstrate that its support and adherence to the Code of Ethics. So the Code of Ethics is a very important vehicle for us, and as I say, I constantly emphasise it. But I actually want people to not just sign it because they're told to, but engage with them, engage with the concerns that they might have. Some of them which are somewhat misplaced, but and through explanation you're able to allay their concerns, but through persuasion, explanation, that people understand why they're signing it, and then they adhere to and live by them.
So there isn't training attached to that?
There is training. There's day-long training for everyone.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Commissioner.
But sorry, may I add about the Code of Ethics? It is a requirement now for promotion that you do sign up to the Code of Ethics. We do require that all our supervisors, as I've said before, their behaviours are very important, and they need to signify they understand and will adhere to the Code of Ethics. So it's an important element of that in terms of behaviours in the organisation.
That's promotion at every level of the organisation?
Every level, including myself.
Okay.
All right.
Have you signed it then, Commissioner?
Yes, I have.
Canador O'Donnell. Two colleagues and myself remaining. Senator Francis Black, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation this morning, and I just want to wish you well in your new role. I'd imagine it's quite a big undertaking, and you have a lot of work ahead.
Yeah.
You've touched on, I suppose, a lot of the issues. In a way, you've touched on, stuff that I wanted to really kind of ask you about. One of them you talked a little bit about, and you've talked about it there again, is the police training and development. And, you touched on the human rights aspect of that. And I just was wondering, could you maybe expand a little bit more on that? On the, when you talk about the human rights aspects of training, could you maybe give us an example of it, or what that entails?
Well, human rights, essential part of policing. It can underpin and clarify a lot of our decision making. And so if as a policing service, we have access then to powers such as search, arrest. We do have, and we can use force in terms of, and this has already been said, in terms of incapacitant spray, but up to including lethal force and the use of firearms. So all of that should be bound by the human rights provisions and that should guide us in terms of our decision making. And there's a whole set of European jurisprudence which guides police about how they should use their powers of arrest, search, how they use force, and indeed then underpinning that, how they should plan for major events, critical incidents where so public order incident or firearms incidents. So there's a lot of, just when you take human rights itself, there's a lot of guidance underneath which is invaluable to us in terms of how we seek the police and how we seek the police with public support whilst within the very high standards that human rights expects of us. So when we say they want to incorporate human rights, actually what we're saying is we want to bring in all the guidance that has been provided through European jurisprudence as to how we should police certain types of events.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose the reason I'm asking that, I'm very conscious, I suppose there was a report that came out earlier this year around mental health within the Garda Síochána, and the fact that the reality is that the Garda are working in the coalface of huge issues. I would imagine, that they're dealing with very traumatic issues.
Yes.
And there would be almost a form of PTSD around some of the issues that they might have to deal with, particularly working in the coalface. And a lot of it, there would be quite a high percentage of the Gardaí dealing with, addiction issues in particular, which is an area that I'm very aware of, and also I have worked in. And there's a lot of burnout, I would imagine, but addiction issues brings on a lot of very difficult situations like fights, crashes, car crashes, domestic violence. So from that perspective, within the Garda Síochána, what supports? Because I think that's a huge area, I really do. And I understand that often the Garda Síochána don't really want to ask for help because, it's not maybe, cool to ask for help or whatever. So I'm just wondering, what supports would you be thinking of putting in place around all of that?
And this strikes to, the well-being of the organisation. And you're right, the work that they undertake at times can be very difficult, and you're dealing with difficult scenarios, and indeed, dealing with incidents which are seared into the mind, and that has an impact. But we do have a wellbeing strategy in place, and if I ask Julian just to outline the detail of all that we've done, because we have made significant advances in that area.
I suppose, Senator, it really starts with us all supporting each other. That in that informal mechanism starts the process off where we as members of the organisation are supportive of those who have to deal with the sort of circumstances that you describe. And that's enhanced by peer support, formal peer support mechanisms where individuals can make contact with others who have been trained in this space to assist in dealing with the the realities of the experiences. On a further layer then, our employee assistance service available throughout the country, professionally trained individuals who are there to provide the range of supports for any individual who encounter difficulty in all aspects of their personal and work life. And lastly, in the formal space, a confidential 24/7 counselling line which is available, delivered independently to the organisation, which provides the option for counselling services to those who feel that they need that. Underpinning all of this, we have a new Chief Medical Officer appointed in the last 12 months, and he's very conscious and very aware of this space, and as the Commissioner said, the need to ensure that the types of supports that are provided to all our members, staff and Garda members, are available in place, and he is committed to enhancing and developing that further over the coming, years. As I agree with you completely, I, in my role, will not face the sort of traumatic experiences that my colleagues around the country have to endure. But my responsibility is to ensure that, if and when people are in difficulty, that the necessary supports are there, and will continue to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I suppose in a way, I believe prevention sometimes can be better than cure. So, it's almost, an idea to train up a lot of the Gardaí in dealing with people on that kind of compassionate level, which is not easy to do, and I understand that it's hard to do. But if they learned to treat people in general, whatever crime they might have committed, obviously there's some crimes that are worse than others, but when it comes to addiction, with that dignity and respect, I think it can prevent burnout. And I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but that is the reality. So I would just, I suppose, encourage you to explore that a little bit more, because I do think it would help the Garda Síochána who are working, on the ground a lot. I really do think that would help with prevention, and rather than them getting to because there's so much shame involved in and asking for help, particularly in the Garda Síochána, so that's a difficult one. They're afraid to ask, and they might look weak. So it's just something that I'd love you to kind of consider in going forward. With regard to the overtime, I just wanted to kind of get an understanding on the overtime piece. Are you saying that the money that would normally go into the overtime is going to go for training? Is that what I heard you saying? I just wanted to kind of...
No, what I'm saying is if I overspend in one area, such as overtime, then that loses my flexibility to put resources in other areas. I have to look to other budget heads to see what adjustments, and those are adjustments timewards that I have to make, Senator. Yeah. So it's a. But even like this is relevant to your previous point. Like overtime is beyond the working week. It's additional hours on individuals, and there is a welfare issue that people and our staff can't be expected just to constantly be in the workplace, but should have proper periods of rest and time with their friends and family. So there is a the downside of overtime can be literally just physical burnout and then the attendant issues that come with that. But even just respect your previous question, I just want to make another point about the Commission. The Commission on Future Policing has talked a lot about the rise of the work that we're doing in respect of harm, but also then put that in a multi-agency response, critical intervention teams, and perhaps then co-location with us with other primarily probably healthcare and social service professionals. And if that happens, actually, that'll change some of the culture as well, and that would be a good thing if we're able to do that. The overtime is a budget. If I overspend the budget, it means something else, somewhere else may have to give.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the overtime and burnout in particular. So I think you mentioned something about you said cultural change comes from behavioural change, and it's almost like I feel when you said that it's like from your perspective that you will be leading by example. Would I be right in saying that?
Well, yes, and that's my intention, to lead the organisation by example, and then if I lead by example, then I can demand of others the behaviours that I expect of them, and the behaviours, as I've said, is set out in the Code of Ethics, and that's what I require.
Yeah. And just one final question, Caoimhghín, just from your perspective, what do you think are your biggest challenges ahead? Or your biggest challenge, maybe, as opposed to challenges?
I think, well, there are a number of challenges actually, but one or two.
Choose the biggest one.
I think one is around the communication within the organisation. So all of us, in effect, are lined up with the mission and all pointing in the one direction. So just the communication of what our vision is, and then how we're actually going to deliver that as a policing service, as an Garda Síochána. So, and if we get that clear in the organisation, then a lot of the decision making, you know, rises up through the organisation. Then, if people are clear what's expected of them, then I can expect them then to exercise a good deal more autonomy in what to do, because they have an understanding of what's required of them, and they then can, you know, make their own decisions, and then you start to reap the benefits of fast-time decisions being made with innovation and energy, and that's where we want to get to.
Okay, Senator.
Thank you.
And finally, among the panel of members, Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you in your new position.
Thank you.
It's the first time I met you. All I've really seen yourself have been in the newspapers and on the TV. To be honest with you, I'm impressed. You've come in from, even though you say you're not an outsider, you've come from a different part of the country. I want to wish you best. To me, what I see is what I get. You seem to be a very honest person. You seem to be a person who wants to get the job done. The thing I like about you was you come in and the first thing you said was that you had confidence in the force. It means that the people working under you knows there's a man coming here and he means business. I think one of the biggest challenges you mentioned from day one when you got the job was the border after the Brexit. Coming from the Dundalk area, the border plays a very big part of the community. As an ex-member of the 27 Battalion in Dundalk, an army man, I know what it's like to patrol the 34 border crossings from Cullerville to Omeath. During the troubled time, it wasn't a nice time to be involved. So, and also too is we've got a lot of illicit trade there at the moment. Is like the fuel smuggling and the cigarettes and everything else at the moment, and it's just not a nice time. And I'm a member of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly. I spent the last 2 days in London, and the main topic was the Brexit. Theresa May has said that she's 95% of the Brexit sorted out. The last 5% is the border. Leo Varadkar or Taoiseach has says that if the border situation is not sorted out, violence is going to come back. These are things that we don't want to hear. You mean but the bottom line is, I think it's very important that you have a plan of action going forward. I've been very lucky the last few months. Charlie Flanagan, the Minister for Justice, visited Dundalk recently. Went up with Superintendent Gerald Cawley. I'd like to put on record at the moment is I find Superintendent Gerald Cawley very approachable and very honest and very upfront. And in fairness, he gets a Garda a good name in the area. We visited the Dundalk Garda station. My main concerns with the Garda station is there doesn't seem to be an inch of space left. In fairness, like the amount of stuff they're taking in, the amount of investigation they're doing, and they're doing a good job. I can see a presence of the Garda on the beat, which I think is very good now. We also visit the Dromad Garda station, which is kind of a prefab building there at the moment. I don't know whether you're familiar or not with it. And a good few years ago is they bought a house beside the Garda station, and it's an awful shame that that's not been used. And the Minister has given a commitment that he will invest in the Dromad Garda station. And I'd like to know is did he say anything to do with the Dromad Garda station? The reason I said that there is we've also got a traffic code there at the moment and in fairness, I do see the Gardens in the area putting up patrols in the motorway, and I think they're doing a pretty good job at the moment. So, can I ask you, what is your plans for the border areas? as you said, it's one of the biggest tasks that you're going to have going forward.
Well, the first thing, the first thing, the rule of law will prevail. We have to provide a service there which protects people and which also then prevents the further growth of organised crime and in fact erodes that, but also then deals with the threat that there may be of terrorism as well. We're not sure how Brexit is going to work out. We're not sure of the drivers that there may be behind any of those issues, but certainly I think we've identified properly what the concerns are of the local populations and how we should address those. And I think why we emphasise that in lots of ways, people's local concerns about robbery or really bad driving, the antisocial behaviour through bad driving, etc., are somewhat missed in the whole big sort of political debates around Brexit. But those are of concern to us, and we will be there for the local communities. In terms of organised crime and terrorism, we'll obviously be watching those very closely. We'll be in a position to react should the climate change in terms of the threat posed by either of those, but we are particularly concerned, I think, in respect of organised crime, how that will use the difference in tax tariffs, as I've said, to try and build up revenue. But we will work with other partners in respect of that. 2 weeks from now, we have the annual cross-border organised crime conference, and that always has a focus on the various forms of criminality that we see right across the island of Ireland, not just about smuggling, but also then around other areas of organised crime that we can cooperate on, not just about the border area. And I'm meeting with the Chief Constable before that to agree further areas that we can develop upon. I think it's incumbent on us at these times of uncertainty that we do our utmost to reach out to our neighbouring law enforcement agency to try and assure people that as best we can, we're ahead of the game, even though we're not quite sure exactly what shape the game's going to be, and that's part of the problem here.
Listen, I want to talk about resources. I am very concerned about the Brexit, and I am very concerned what will happen to the border. I lived in Dundalk all my life, and I've got family on both sides of the border. And in fairness, the peace process in 1998 was probably one of the best things that ever happened in this country. And I'm just trying to say is, I wouldn't like to see it go back the way it was. And I have no intentions here of slagging off anybody. The most important thing here to me is peace and working together. I'm kind of a wee bit concerned over the resources. I will say one good thing is I'm delighted to see Templemore back up and running again. You mentioned there's another 180, whether you call them graduates or recruits, coming on the line in November. I think that's a major plus. Are you happy enough with the numbers that's coming out from Templemore? At the moment, I think you have between 600 and 800 per annum. My main concerns there at the moment is you've got a lot of retirements there as well. And the thing is, the Minister has given a commitment that there's going to be 4,000 civilians employed with the Garda, which in turn would release Garda to work on the beat. And you mentioned earlier on about the paperwork, getting the paperwork sorted at the moment is. Can you elaborate on the resources, about this commitment on the 4,000 civilians? As I said here, in Dundalk there at the moment the reason I mentioned Dundalk is it's the best example for me because it's from the area I'm from, right? But I'm sure it happens all in the other border towns as well. They seem to be short a few Garda cards there at the moment. But the motorway. Probably living close to the motorway, there's a lot of pluses, but there's also a lot of negativities. Because when the guards tell you, you've got people coming from other jurisdictions coming in, robbing and getting back on the motorway, and it is very, very hard to monitor the motorway. But as I said earlier on, it's important that we get these resources done. Also, you mentioned earlier on about promotions. You mentioned 100 or so sergeants getting promoted. Still in Dundalk at the moment, there's still 6 vacancies for sergeants there at the moment. As you know yourself, the more experienced people you get in the border area and in certain areas, I think it's very important that we have the proper resources there. So I wonder, can you elaborate, are you happy enough with resources, happy enough with Templemore, happy enough with these 4,000 civilian again?
Well, there are very positive elements because, yes, while we are recruiting, there is also cessations from the organisation, but we are in a net gain, and so this year we'll have over 700 enter Templemore. About 300 will leave, but we're at a net gain of well over 400 in terms of Garda members. And similarly, then next year, our plans are around, particular big recruitment around Garda staff. That'll displace then officers' members out to operational duty, but we'll also have a growth next year in terms of Garda members, Garda officers as well. So that is a very strong position to be in. So this time next year, and there is an issue around the money in this, and that's all being worked through, and so I can't give the precise figures, but we will be many hundreds ahead in our overall head count of where we are at this moment in time. So that's positive. In terms of the promotions, I'll have to inquire about the specific situation in Dundalk because we have over 172 promotions to sergeants. Just in effect, have taken up their role last week. So if there's still a gap there in Dundalk, I'll inquire after that and see what can be done, and we'll report that then to the committee. In respect of vehicles, if I look to my colleague here, because vehicles are an issue for us, but still there is ongoing investment there as well.
Yeah, so still ongoing investment, Deputy. And again, if there are particular issues in Dundalk, we'd be happy to look into that. But we are in a period where the government have made a significant allocation for us over recent years, and will continue into next year around enhancing our fleet. So again, if there are particular issues, we'll happily take that offline and come back.
Well, I have to say I'm delighted for the simple reason is that the last time we asked the question about resources, I was told that the amount of recruits coming in from Templemore was kind of balancing the retirement. So I'm delighted to see that has changed, which I think that's a very positive thing going forward. I think morale is a very important thing going forward, and let's call it you're the boss of the Garda, and let's call it you have to keep your staff, which is the Garda, happy. And I think there's a lot of issues over the last number of years. I think the numbers. I think we're getting close to getting the numbers up and running. I think the retiring you mentioned there at the moment, the resources, and I think the pay conditions there. It's important to get the pay conditions back, and also the position. I know you mentioned earlier on that you're meeting Sergeant Mouse McCabe in the afternoon. Yeah. I personally think it's a good move communicating with Sergeant McCabe there last week. I think what happened to Sergeant McCabe should never happen again. And I'm just delighted to see that going forward. But how do you find? Maybe it's not a fair question to ask this, but how do you find the morale in the Garda this year, Colin, compared to the morale that you had with the PSNI?
I think police officers the world over have certain character traits that it's hard to explain. This some of them are content in their discontent, or happy in their ability to raise things of issues there. So there's a little bit of that, but I have to say the vast majority that I meet when I go out and about, they do seem to be in a good place. Pretty quickly any sort of frost there may be falls away, and you have good conversations with them. And when you're talking to people, not just the probationers, but if you're talking to people, 10, 20, indeed 30 years service, they sort of, after 5 minutes, they tell you the way it is. We're all, we all have an innate understanding of each other, and so I would not be pessimistic about where we are in terms of demand, in terms of morale. I think in terms of how we build that morale, the cultural audit showed that there was a real strong public service ethos in the organisation, and I think now it's for me then to additionally motivate people so that they know that they're supported, that I try and make life a little simpler for them through the equipment that they're given, digitisation, even indeed the uniform that they wear, and also then making sure they're supported through training as well, and also see that this is a place of career opportunity in terms either of promotion or indeed specialisation. And I think it's very important for us that we're placed as an employer of choice in the employment market, because we're competing in a busy place, in a busy employment market for the talent that's out there, and we want to be one of people's first options when they're thinking of what their employment's going to be going forward.
As I said, I think it's very important that you have your guard, your staff happy. Listen, we've been very unlucky in the Defence Forces, in the Garda barracks, the Garda in the last couple of years. On the 25th of January 2013, we had the murder of Adrian Donoghue, and on the 11th of October 2015, we had the murder of Tony Golin. Are you still putting plenty of resources in to try to solve these two murders, up? Right.
Yes, those murder investigations remain active, and well, I'll go no further than that. They remain active. There's actions going on with those. Yes.
The thing I don't like about it at the moment is, and I seen it happen myself, is the verbal abuse that the Garda get on the beats. I don't like to see that there, and also the verbal abuse that they get when they come in patrol cars, when they come to disturbances. What is the up-to-date situation on the body camera? Like I will be honest with you, recently I got a dash camera put in my car because I'm hearing about all these fixed accidents in the roads and all this kind of crack at the moment. And I feel an awful lot safe for myself driving the car. And I believe that the Japanese person was killed in a dog there recently. I think there was a few cars passed, and I think the Garda got a lot of information from the dash cameras. So I would really like to see maybe being compulsory for Garda on the beat or Garda on patrol cars to wear the body cameras. To me, it'd be good in collecting evidence, and it'd be also good for protecting the abuse that the Garda get from the public.
We have an ongoing project, not only just looking at body-worn video, but just overall the subject of CCTV. I'm a big supporter of body-worn video. In fact, it provides quick evidence, but also can settle situations down if people who would otherwise be disruptive or difficult realise that all of this has been recorded on camera. It actually has the effect of settling a situation down, but it is very good then in terms of going into court. So big supporter of it. There's a project underway, and we just are exploring some of the legal complexities of introducing body-worn video for individual officers, and making sure we're in the right side of the legal position of that. But also the case for them has been well made. I'm a supporter. Once we know what the legal position is. Once we clear that hurdle, then we want to move forward with a rollout of cameras.
Right. Just to finish off, the last question I want to ask is, the question I'm mainly being asked about just that there is to do with the conflict of interest. You being a member of the PSNI and now being the chief of the Garda Síochána.
Yes.
The reason I'm asking that question is, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's very, very good. We had two Garda commissioners and they're gone. Now, and in fairness, I feel as though we got the best man for the job. As I said here, I'm taking it at face value. I think the experience that you had working with the British Security Service, MI5, I think it'd be important going forward. Let's get rid of the negativity at the moment. You're in here to do the job. You're going to look after the Garda. You're going to protect the public. You mentioned here the local community working hard. And the thing I like about you're making this job simple, because you're saying is you can make it a difficult job, or you can make it a simple job. You said here in your presentation this morning, you want the Garda to be visible. You want them to be polite, you want them to be honest, work hard, and remember that your core duty is to protect and support the community. I think it's perfect. Yeah. But I'm trying to say is, the contacts that you have made with your years working with the PSNI and now going forward is, what is your plan? With all the contact and the people that you met in your previous job, will you really go back to them looking for help You know, because I'll be honest with you, I know I'm a TD, but my previous job was I was involved in business writers, and the best part about running a very successful business is to be able to delegate, lift the phone up and ask people for advice and everything else. So I'm sure it's probably the same in everything. So I'm trying to say is the contacts that you've made, I'm sure you've made good contacts, and I'm sure that the information that you have in your previous job will that be all still available for you to work on?
Well, certainly my contacts with the police service in Northern Ireland are entirely open up for me, and indeed one of the reasons the Chief Constable and I are meeting in 2 weeks' time is just to think, you know, how do we take the relationship on to the next phase, because there is a lot that we can learn from each other. That's very clear. There's a lot that law enforcement, you know, throughout the world can learn from each other. But when we have such a close neighbour, you know, those relationships should be deep and meaningful, and that should, you know, not just be around, you know, crime investigation or sharing of intelligence. They're obviously very important, but also then sharing personnel, sharing the skills, sharing training, and seeing all the areas that we're able to, you know, properly collaborate with each other, as envisaged by the intergovernmental agreement on police-to-police cooperation that we have right back from 2002. So we'll want to re-emphasise that. And also, again, obviously, I suppose anyone who's been in policing for as long as I have, you have contacts then, not just in the United Kingdom, but throughout the world, and you can draw upon those as well. The thing about being Commissioner and being Commissioner of An Garda Síochána is there is a lot of goodwill extended towards this organisation, and I intend to tap into that, and both in terms of operational cooperation, but also then in terms of training or other expertise and assistance as well. And even just maybe I didn't say it strongly enough in the conflict of interest point earlier. The thing about taking this job on, and what I found, and I'm only here, you know, I think 8 weeks now, it's all-consuming, and I'm entirely absorbed by it. I am here, as I said in my very opening remarks, to lead the organisation, to serve the people of Ireland with the outcome that, as best as I can and this organisation can, we protect them, and particularly we protect the vulnerable. And that's it. That is my agenda in a nutshell, and that's what I expect of the rest of the organisation.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your honesty. I'd like to thank you for the way you answered the questions. You answered them straight away, off the cuff, and everything else at the moment, isn't it? And I'm sure the chairman will agree here. Was like we're all here to work together, and over the next, could I say, next few years, or next few days, or next few months, we don't know how long this government's going to last.
An optimist, Peter.
But listen, all I hope is that the way you started, I hope that's where you finish.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Fitzpatrick. And Commissioner, it just comes to myself just to a last number of questions. And I note from your own introductory remarks, the circulated text,
yes,
that a number of points I just wanted to seek an elaboration on. Some of these are connected with the engagements we've had previously, and your colleagues on both sides, both John and Joseph, will know, you know, some of the areas that we have addressed as a committee with An Garda Síochána previously. But I want to welcome your statement that acknowledges the significant contribution made by the civil servant colleagues within the Garda service.
Yeah.
These are the unsworn or non-sworn members of An Garda Síochána, and that, you know, these personnel are now known, and quite correctly, as you refer to, as Garda staff. I think it is very, very important. We've had members of said staff before us here before, and it was the view of this committee, and you know, that there was some evidence that non-sworn staff within Garda Síochána were not appreciated and respected on the same level as sworn members of the Garda. And I would expect that this statement by you is a clear indication that that is something that will not present in the future. Would you like to make just a brief comment on that?
Well, absolutely. They're known as Garda staff because they're integral to the delivery of the policing service that An Garda Síochána provides. So it's as simple as that. But I think also hope it illustrates that I recognise how central their role is, and also, we are on a path of growth towards 4,000 Garda staff. They will be absolutely, and there's no doubt about this, absolutely essential to the service that we provide. So there's no question of there being a sort of like two-tier membership or employment within the organisation. And I changed the name to Garda staff, I think, in the second week, just to make it very clear. The expression hitherto had been civilians, and I just couldn't get my head around it because they're so integral to what we do. And that importance will grow. I know 4,000 is the figure that we've been given, but I could well see that it could go beyond 4,000 in the years ahead.
Right. Well, I just want to record welcoming that and your reaffirmation of it in response to me. Having a police and security service that is, and the language you used was, more representative of the community it serves. Could you just elaborate again in relation to more representative of the community it serves? What is it that you're honing in on there in relation to the policing and security service roles of An Garda Síochána? More representative of the community? Are there deficits in terms of, the recruitment base? Could you just give us a little more in relation to SIM?
Well, yes, I think you only have to walk around Dublin city centre to see, what increasingly a visibly diverse place it is, and in time, An Garda Síochána should also reflect that as well. So we need to reflect the diversity of the society that we're charged with policing. There's obviously gender in the first place, but we've good representation in the organisation. But around visible ethnic minorities, our representation is somewhat less, and that's an area which I think we will have to work on. But there's a point then, is about how we do that outreach. A lot of people, and it's similar elsewhere as well, but people know people within An Garda Síochána, be it friends or fathers of friends or relations, and get to know of policing through those sorts of associations. Whereas I think we need to, and for others then, we're a bit of a mystery, a bit of an enigma, what goes on in there. And so we have to outreach and explain what we're about, that we're a good employer. If you work with us, no matter what role, you're working for a good employer. You can have a career, and there's advancement and learning development in that career, along with the rewards of actual public service. So there's a bit about us just promoting this organisation as an employer and trying to reach people who probably hitherto hadn't thought of a career in An Garda Síochána.
Okay, very good. Well, I welcome that also. I want to just record that.
And can I also say that the recruitment of Garda staff is a good avenue into that as well, because that can give people an introduction then, and maybe then in time they may also then want to become, in effect, a sworn member as well. So if we have a number of different routes in at different levels, it can only improve the opportunity we have for promoting the diversity of the organisation.
Okay. In the same tranche of points, you talked about delivering a professional policing and security service that protects the vulnerable. And the specific issue I just wish to ask about is, I'm presuming this isn't only in terms of, looking ahead, but, in terms of historical inquiries.
Yes.
You've alluded to a number of issues, outstanding murder inquiries that are ongoing, and we wish those well. But there was an earlier reference to the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, Commissioner, the 17th of May 1974, a day that I will never forget. And it was with no reference to a hierarchy of victimhood, but it was the single greatest atrocity throughout all the years of conflict that we have known on this island in relatively recent times. The Houses of the Oireachtas, this Parliament, has on 3 occasions unanimously passed motions appealing for a full cooperation with the appointed inquirers into the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, appealing to the British government and its agencies to fully cooperate in the provision of all documentation, information, files relevant to the respective inquiries into those matters that took place north of the border and elsewhere, if that be the case. In response earlier, Deputy Commissioner Toomey took the response to one of my colleagues' inquiries in relation to this particular matter. You had yourself indicated earlier a willingness to meet with victims and representatives of victims. In this particular instance, the organisation Justice for the Forgotten, very heroically led, I may say, by a lady known as Margaret Irwin. Can I ask, will you facilitate an opportunity to meet with Miss Irwin and with victims of the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, survivors and bereaved families? There were 33 deaths involved. And, in your own position, and unquestionably you're highly qualified for the position you've undertaken, your experience being a significant factor in it. But can you, because of your previous roles and responsibilities and exposure, can you bring something more to the call, the wish, and despite the passage of time, 1974, here we are, 44 years later, heading on. That cry for truth and for justice in relation to those particular atrocities hasn't faded. Can you, in your experience, knowledge of, contact, communication et al., can you offer any hope for a better position than maintains currently, where even as Deputy Commissioner Toomey has indicated, this is not an area that there has been a communications flow, something that we all too sadly know very well?
These atrocities are now my responsibility to investigate. So, and in the preface my comments in that regard, I'm very much aware of my obvious responsibilities around these, and if I might take time then to consider your questions and then come back to you on where we are at this moment in time. Your earlier question about meeting with the group Justice for the Forgotten. Yes, of course, yes. I will meet with them. When you say about hope for individuals, I think I have to temper that remark a little. My experience of trying to investigate these matters, legacy matters as they're now called, has been one of frustration, that there's very little that is achieved through the criminal justice route. And so I will meet with them and will consider the points that you've made and will respond to those. But these cases have proved down through the years to be incredibly difficult, actually, to in effect bring to a successful criminal justice conclusion. One may be able to find other information which is new it's very rare that that leads to criminal justice actual ending to this.
Well, in this particular instance, and I'll close with this, in this particular instance, it's that information held long past has not been forthcoming. And this has been repeated time after time by those entrusted with the exercise of investigation and inquiry. And in reflection of that failure to cooperate on the part of the British government and all its agencies, including the RUC in its time, in terms of proffering, presenting what information that it could share in relation to those particular events of that day back in May 1974. There is that significant issue. So I appreciate your reply, and I look forward to hearing from you in due course in relation to same. I will record that I very much welcome that you will be willing to meet with Justice for the Forgotten, and that's something I've no doubt that they will initiate a process in order to set such an opportunity in place. Okay. So thank you for that. Just in relation to two last things. Yes, you'd mentioned to Senator Black about priorities and communications, and you've undertaken today to come back to the committee on a number of matters.
Yes.
We very much welcome that. I'd just like to say that, and with no specific reference, but you were talking about internal communications, I think, in the first instance, in relation to priority. But I will have to say, as chair of this committee, that I would hope that communications with ourselves would also improve into the future. There have been inordinate delays in responses to specific questions that this committee has posed to former holders of your office. And I'm saying this on behalf of all here and all elected opinion across the board who make up this committee, that it has vexed in the past and it's unnecessary. So I would greatly appreciate a significant improvement in that area. And my final question, just in relation to something that came up only last week. We met with two of your assistant commissioners, Leahy and Finn.
Yes.
And we had your former colleague, the assistant chief constable, Alan Todd, before us in these very seats. And we talked about the importance of partnership in address of issues that very often present to an Garda Síochána almost wholly and solely. I'm talking about areas such as mental health, as you refer to, I think yourself, youth crime and reducing recidivism.
Yes.
It came out very much in the engagement last week that there is maybe a point of opinion, but there might be a better degree of interaction and cooperation across the different agencies north of the border than may be the case here. Now, maybe a moot point and you may have a different view, but that's neither here nor there. It's that we need to see that level of cooperation across the board, and as public elected representatives we would be very much aware of the fact that members of Garda Síochána find themselves having to deal with situations that are not of their primary responsibility in terms of the community safety et al., and very particularly in the areas of mental health. Some of the difficulties are that you're a 24/7 organisation. Some of these other services are not. And that is a huge, huge problem. Even in my years of public service, I've had to strive to find where one can get help in a given situation after 5 o'clock in the evening and at weekends, when very often these problems can present. I just thought it is such an important area for the members of the Garda Síochána and societally, that I'd like just to conclude with this, to ask you to elaborate on this, building this interaction, this maybe in a more structured way, have you got, I know it's early days for you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it is an area that you've reflected. I welcome that, and I just would like to underscore the importance of it. And could you offer any additional commentary in relation to this very, very important area?
Okay. Well, and I'll address that. If I just address the first point of communication, as I said at the very start and in my comments as well, we wanted to have communication with you of openness and transparency, and I was struck by Senator Conway's remarks, and I think the way to go forward with that, and he just asked me to identify what issues I've seen in the organisation, as I see those and they crystallise, then obviously the committee, along with the policing authority, will be briefed and briefed properly on those. And also then I've noted your comments about expedition of correspondence as well and reports. In terms of collaboration, the Commission is very strident about this. It talks about widening the definition of policing, and it talks about how the policing mission is changing, and talks about harm. And they make specific recommendations around government departments working together and crisis intervention teams, but also then and Garda Síochána together with social service and healthcare professionals being co-located. So I think we have certainly a different vision for what the service to the public will look like going forward. But underpinning these, we need to have the correct strategies, organisational strategies in place with our partners, and also then we need to resolve the issues around appropriate information sharing as well, because undoubtedly more of our time is being spent on dealing with mental health issues, but also issues around drink and drug addiction. That's increasingly our work, but also crimes against the vulnerable seem to be increasing, or certainly the reports of them are increasing as well. So that brings us, again, in contact with our partners in terms of having a more holistic and victim-centred approach to the particular individual and perhaps the dire circumstances they find themselves in. But the Commission has specific recommendations there, and I know that we're very much alive to those.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner Harris. And without any further ado, we've sat for, well, certainly as this session, more than 2.5 hours. So I want to, on behalf of the committee, to thank you, Commissioner Harris, and to wish you well in your new role. And I hope that today has been a first of many engagements that this committee will have with you. Peter is speculating we'll still be here in 2 years' time, this Dáil, but we're not all as confident of that as Peter has suggested. But I want to thank again Deputy Commissioner Toomey and Mr. Joseph Nugent and your colleagues here with you this morning, and we look forward to meeting with you again in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Joint Committee is adjourned until 9 a.m. No Dáil sitting next week. No trick-or-treating, Peter. So we will resume 9 a.m. Wednesday the 7th of November. Caoimhghín Ó Caoláin.